Oh, there, is that better? Okay, thank you, Art. I'll make sure everybody hears me. Okay. First thing I want to do this morning is introduce a new member of the state board, Mike Edwards. Mike, raise your hand there. Yeah. Mike, we're pleased to have him as a member of the board. He's the president, CEO of the Knoxville Chamber of Commerce, also on the board of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Mike travels the world talking about education. So if you have a Rotary Club meeting or a backyard barbecue or something you want somebody to talk about education, just call Mike. He'll be glad to show up and talk about everything education. Right, Mike? Pass. We're pleased to have you. And Lonnie, pleased to have you on board. Lonnie's a new member, but this is his second meeting, so he is a veteran at this point. So we'll proceed. First thing we've got on the agenda is the consent items, adoption of the agenda for the meeting. It's been distributed. Also the minutes of the last meeting, which was August the 5th. Is there a motion that we approve the consent agenda? Got a motion? Second? Any questions, concerns? All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll go to our report items. The first is the BEP Review Committee report. Art, you go do that.
Let's see. Good morning.
Morning.
So I am bringing to you the I think it's the 7th annual BEP Review Committee report. And basically every year, this is a group of about 24 stakeholders throughout the state that take a comprehensive review and look of what's going on with the BEP formula. So I'm going to briefly outline for you this morning some of the points that are in the executive summary of the report, beginning on page 4 of your agenda item. This year, the review committee covered a number of different areas. One thing that was just brought to the attention of the committee this year actually related to the insurance premiums that are in the BEP formula. It was basically discovered that since the inception of the BEP, the state has been paying 10 months of premiums, whereas local school districts are paying 12 months of premiums. And so one of the recommendations in this report is that the full cost of the 12 months of insurance premiums be incorporated into the BEP. The estimated fiscal impact of that, you can see there, is about $56.8 million. And the committee wanted to note that this is the first year that this gap in the insurance premium funding was brought to the attention of the committee, and that was based on actually a letter from the comptroller that was issued in March 2011. The second issue is something that was in last year's report, is related to capital outlay. In the 2010, basically the legislature decided to kind of forego the capital outlay growth, and in last year's report, this is basically mirroring the same recommendation. The estimated fiscal impact of that is about $34.4 million. And that's actually based on analysis of data from an independent source. It's RS Means kind of construction cost reports and things like that. In addition to those two items, the Tennessee Small School Systems for Equity presented 3 recommendations to the committee. They were all adopted in some form. And basically what they relate to, one is something that the Department of Education is already doing in regards to establishing written guidelines on the annual computation of the BEP. That's something that's already in process. And then the other 2 areas really relate as changes occur to the BEP, and if they're occurring kind of at a time frame that the BEP can provide some insight and analysis on that, the analysis of the changes kind of be presented in a public forum, and that it look at not just statewide changes, but drill down to kind of system level changes. And so one of the recommendations related to when analyzing the changes that the Department of Education and a group of other stakeholders would get together in identifying different ways of looking at the analysis of the impact when changes to the formula are brought in place. And so a lot of the discussion of the committee related to those areas. In addition to that, in previous reports, the committee has provided a list of recommendations, and those recommendations are updated in this particular report. If you look at page 7 of the executive summary, it kind of gives a 2011 update of the fiscal impact of the 2010 recommendations. Of course, you can see at the top, full implementation of the VEP 2.0 is about $205 million, and then there are other areas listed there that have been reiterated by the committee on a number of occasions. The very last section relates to every year the committee is charged with doing a review of the salary disparity. And basically what we're seeing this year is when you compare to 2004, the salary disparity is gradually increasing. This year, because there was a statewide change in insurance plans, we were not able to incorporate the impact of also the insurance premiums within our analysis that we normally do. But we do intend to include that analysis once we find the best way to incorporate the statewide changes into existing methodology. And that is a summary of the report.
Okay, thank you, Art. Questions for Art concerning the BEP Review Committee report? Thank you. Recognize that this is a report item. It will go from this committee, from the BEP Review Committee, to the Commissioner of Finance and the Commissioner of Education for their review, approval, and then it come back to the board. So that's the process that this report takes. I think we do need to recognize it's a lot of work that goes into this, and Art, certainly appreciate all your work, Gary's work on chairing that committee. It is a tremendous amount of work and a real complicated job of managing all the parties that we've got involved in the BEP Review Committee to come up with a recommendation. So any questions for Art? Okay, Art, appreciate it. Good job. Thank you. We'll next move to the next report item, which is the report on effectiveness of teacher training programs. And Emily, you going to do that for us?
Morning. So I just want to basically review the 2011 report card on the effectiveness of teacher training programs. This is required by state statute, and it's the 4th year that the report has been put out. This is the 2nd year that THEC has had responsibility for the report. And over the past year, we've been working on redesigning and improving it with the State Board of Education, Department of Education, and the teacher training programs. I just want to highlight the changes this year and what you can find in the report. To begin with, there's an executive summary, and we have findings listed. So we've analyzed the data across the programs and have findings that the public and the programs can access. We also have some documents put together to help people understand the report better. So there's a glossary of terms, and there's a document called How to Read the Program Reports that takes people through step-by-step how to understand what the data actually means. There's also, in the program reports themselves, this year we have additional data, and this was something THEC built a database and collected data directly from the programs, and that's included on the report, which is demographic information as well as academic background information and endorsement areas. There's also a Tennessee state profile, and that looks at comparisons of the teacher preparation programs and the state data as a whole. Also, each preparation program report includes a map that's new this year, and it looks at where the graduates from each program are teaching across the state by county. We still have some changes underway for the report. In about a month, it'll be available online, similar to the K-12 report card that the Department of Education has, and you'll be able to choose a program and then look across for the variables without having to go through the full report. In January and February of next year, we'll have individual feedback reports for the institutions. We're working with the SAS Institute to develop more in-depth analysis that will help the programs with their improvement. And then for next year, the teacher effect data, the new growth measures that are being developed by the state for the teacher evaluation system will be included on the report where they're available. That's an overview of what's included in the report. The findings, again, are in the executive summary.
Okay, questions for Emily? We spent a good bit of time in a workshop yesterday reviewing this report. I think it's an extremely important report. You know, it really is our effort to measure how effective these teacher education programs really are, and to figure out whether the product of those programs, whether the product are effective in teaching children. So this is a very important report. Certainly encourage the improvements that you're making in it and getting the information online. Any questions or comments from board members?
I just have one question. Emily, I think you've done a terrific job with the report, and look forward to reviewing it in depth. But you mentioned the feedback to the individual institutions. What will that look like, and how will that take place over the course of the next few months?
Sure. We're working, so a lot of the programs, if there aren't enough teachers in a specific subject area, or if you're trying to differentiate between the master's and the bachelor's program, in 1 year there isn't enough of that information. So we're working at taking across the years and then being able to differentiate the specific program effectiveness. And this is something the programs asked for. They were interested, the breakdown of subjects is helpful to them, but they wanted to be able to distinguish between their master's and their bachelor's and really get at what they need to improve. So that's something, we'll need to look across years to make sure there's enough teachers for that specific information, but that's what we'll be looking at.
Okay, other questions?
I just wanted to say how grateful we are at the Department to THEC's work on this. I think it is an enormously helpful piece of the puzzle as we think about our work, and we're just really grateful to all the thoughtfulness that has gone into the report.
Great. Rich, anything?
Well, we obviously take this seriously, and we're glad that we're a part of the mix. The puzzle is a good way of putting it. But something that Emily has said repeatedly, and we've all said, that this is all about improving the programs, and that's what keeps us moving forward.
Great. Okay, very good. Emily, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll now move to the action items on first reading. The first is a migrant education Title 1C service delivery. And Paula, okay.
Good morning. I'm Paula Gaddis. I am the migrant coordinator for the department. And this item proposes to amend the Consolidated State Application of 2002 by modifying the Tennessee service delivery model for migrant children through the funds that are available from Title 1C in ESEA, moving from a summer week-long summer camp model to an in-home tutoring model. And the reason for that change became apparent when we did our most recent comprehensive needs assessment 2 years ago. And we realized that we were not, to my satisfaction, in compliance with Section 1304D of the statute, which says we need to give priority to our migrant students who are classified as priority for service students. And those are students who have moved within the last 12 months, so they've had their education interrupted and are at a higher risk of failing. With our summer models, we were able to serve a good number of our migrant students in the state of Tennessee. But because of the nature of the geography of where our students are, there are pockets where we have more migrant students than we have others. So it makes sense, for example, to have a summer program in Hamblin County where we can get almost 100 migrant students in the summer, where if we have one in Shelby County, there's one. You know, and it doesn't make sense to have a week-long summer program. So when this was put into place in 2002, the decision was made by the people that were here at the time to do summer programs where we can hit the most students, where we have the pockets of students. But in our needs analysis, what we realized is that we were not serving our priority for service students. we are only serving 38% of our priority for service students with the summer model. And to me, that's not satisfactory. I think it needs to be more than that. So by doing an in-home tutoring model where we pair a tutor up with the individual migrant student and we actually go into the home and provide one-on-one educational services throughout the school year, I think we're going to be able to give more attention to those priority one students and get more of them because they are here year-round, not just in the summer. So summer camps, because they're so limited in length of time, we miss some of our priority for one students because they're not here at the same time the summer camps are being run. Now, we've been piloting the in-home tutoring model, and it has been very successful. We've had excellent response from the parents and the families. We've been able to get a system of communication with the classroom teachers going so that we know exactly what standards we need to be working on. All of the lessons that our tutors present are standards-based and based on a needs assessment of that student and feedback from the teacher. So we're really targeting the needs, trying to close that achievement gap between the migrant population and other populations. In the proposed changes, we have left language in there if we ever get more money through Title I-C, and who knows when that's going to happen, but if we ever do, we've left in the language so that the door is open so that we could do both. We could do the summer program and the in-home tutoring. So that language has been left in there as well. And that's what this item proposes to do.
Okay, questions? I guess the biggest question I have is the adequacy of the resources we have available to do this. Now, you said you've got some things left there in case more resources are available.
We do. Here's my soapbox. Currently, Tennessee is the lowest funded per pupil through Title I-C of any state in the nation. We get about approximately $90 to $99 per student, depending on the year. There are states that get $1,200 per student. And all of this has to do with the hold harmless that was put in the law in 2002. So until things get reauthorized, we have very limited funds. But we do have funds available to do the in-home tutoring. We've piloted it for a year. Our resources have been adequate to do that. So I feel very confident that we can move forward with it. We can't do both unless we get more funding through I-C. So.
Now, the I-C funding is federal funding?
That is all federal funding, yes. And those are really the only funds we have to work with our migrant students.
Okay. Questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve on first reading? Got a motion? Got a second? Got a second? Any questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Paula, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, a teacher preparation program approval cycle. David, you gonna do that?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Martin Nash apologizes. He's been under the weather for the last couple of days. But thank you, Chair and members. This essentially puts the accreditation cycle for state approval of teacher training programs on the same 7-year cycle as the NCATE cycle. For many years and for very good reasons, Tennessee used a 5-year approval cycle. In other words, they were initially approved. It allowed a cohort of students to graduate, get a set of data back on those students, and then look at them through a state lens. NCATE has been asking for a long time that we align those two processes, given the fact that we have much more robust information about our teacher training programs, some of which you just heard about. This seems to make some sense in that we can have a yearly look at what our teacher training programs do. This would not necessarily be, this is only around the state approval side, has nothing to do with the national accreditation side. We think it's a good move, and I'll happily answer any questions you might have.
Questions for David? Mike?
David, run by me this again. We're talking about credentialing them or giving them accreditation over 5 years?
So there are two trains that run on parallel tracks for many of our teacher training programs. One is national accreditation, which is optional in our state. The other one is state approval, which is not optional. So we're talking about putting the state approval process on the same calendar as the national approval process for the first visit. And after the first visit, it becomes a 7-year cycle anyway. So this is really only for that first visit that they've had from a state team by state examiners from the State Board of Examiners who come onto the campus and look at the artifacts in the same way, looking at the same standards, just through a less expensive lens, frankly, than national accreditation. That's a very roundabout way of saying yes.
In light of the report we received earlier, is there a mechanism by which a college of education could be placed on a probationary period without, is it an all or nothing, or can you go to a year to year, you're being, you know, we're looking for you to move from here to here, and we're not going to look at you.
This is a yes and no answer, because that is a process. When there are deficiencies, then those are addressed, and Martin Nash's office and team comes in and says, here's where things are not where they need to be. Give us a plan for how you're going to fix those. Those come before you, and there's an opportunity to look at that and say they've made improvements sufficient to warrant being able to continue recommending candidates for licensure, or they come before you and say they haven't made those improvements.
But does that only happen on 5-year increments?
No, that is an ongoing process. I do not know the exact numbers of that. This is where I miss Martin right now. But he could get you more information on that. And the fact that we now have much better information around those programs will make that a much more nimble process than it has been in the past.
Okay, other questions? To me, the important thing in this whole area is the report that Emily reviewed, and that's, again, you know, looking at how the students that graduate from these programs are actually performing in the classroom, you know, what results they're getting. This program here looks kind of like what's on paper, what's being taught, and this kind of thing at the various institutions. It does not really look at what happens in the classroom after the student gets out in the marketplace.
And that's a good point. I would just point out that accreditation or state approval really says that the conditions are in place, that the faculty have the right credentials, that the standards, the professional licensure standards, are being addressed, and there's artifact of that through course syllabi and course description, and their appropriate field experiences. Now, what happens in terms of student learning results down the road, that's where the good report you just heard has some play.
Okay, now the only changes being made here is changing that cycle from 5 to 7 years to line up with NCATE.
Yes, sir.
That's the only change. Okay, is there a motion we approve this on first reading? Got a motion? Second? Got a second, Lonnie? Okay. Any questions? Discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, David. You got the next item, virtual schools.
The Public Virtual School Act passed last year in the Acts of 2001, Public Chapter 492, asked the State Board to promulgate rules necessary for the implementation of that act. Many of the rules that we already had in place governing brick-and-mortar schools, the 1,700 schools we have, are applicable to virtual schools as well. You know, they have to be standards-based and accountability and all those sorts of things that you'd want to keep in place. There are some nuances around public schools, public virtual schools, that would need to be addressed, and you have those before you. I would note that numbers in that bulleted list under B 1 through 12 are simply statute that we really can't do anything about. Nor would we necessarily want to. I think there's a natural question around the 180 days and 6.5-hour instructional days, and that seems to be sort of a peculiar fit. But we just want to remind those who are providing education virtually to students that that is still a law, that still has, and until that law is changed, there's that's still on the table. Regarding funding, we've had several questions about why these don't address funding mechanisms. That would be a BEP issue, and we have a mechanism for that. And you heard a little bit from Art about that earlier, and we would go through those normal processes for that. In terms of who had a chance to look at this, we took pains to send it out to those districts right now who are most deeply engaged in virtual schooling, and have heard good response from some. They had some good suggestions. Some were incorporated. Some were not able to be incorporated because it was, again, running afoul of statute. So we didn't want to get out ahead of that. We will continue to seek advice on this between now and January, when we hope that you'll give this final approval, so these will be ready for the next school year. And I'll happily answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for David? Teresa?
Everyone, David, does the accountability for virtual schools rest with the local LEA?
It would be considered a school. If it has a school number, it would be just like the elementary school that student came from. So it would have the same accountability structure. They would sit for the same exams. They would have the same targets.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? I think that we all recognize that the virtual schools are going to play a bigger and bigger role in education, and need to, across the state. And, you know, we've got some things in here that appear a little bit awkward for, a virtual school, but a number of them are required by legislation. So I certainly would encourage you to continue to review these, to get people to look at them, see if they really are workable. And, it may be that we're going to need to see if we can't seek some changes in legislation in some places to really make sure that we can effectively utilize virtual schools.
I would say, if my memory's correct, this is maybe the 5th or 6th straight meeting where we've had something relative to either virtual school policy or dealing with virtual schools before you. This is an area that's moving faster than policy can keep up. And that's not a bad thing. But we are trying to be proactive on some things, and frankly, we're having to be reactive on some things, and that's okay as long as we get it right. I suspect you'll have a 7th, 8th, and 9th time you'll see something regarding distance learning and virtual schooling.
Well, I think the thing that's important is we don't end up with rules out there that prohibit the effective implementation of virtual programs. That's an important thing. Okay, any other questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve the virtual school rule on first reading? Got a motion? Second? Second, Teresa? Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, David. Isolation restraint reporting, Bill Wilson. Bill?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Public Chapter 457 of the Acts of 2011 amended what is commonly known as the Isolation and Restraint Law, and it mandates that the state board promulgate rules that mandate a standard reporting format for use by school personnel when children with disabilities are either isolated or restrained. This particular proposed rule was developed with the input of members of the disability community, school systems, department staff, as well as your staff. It has been reviewed and recommended by the Advisory Council on the Education of Students with Disabilities. As far as the rule proposal itself, the first two elements are basically housekeeping in nature. They correct a code citation that is within the rules. Also, there are a couple of definitions that are now provided in state code. Previously were defined only in the rules, so we would need to defer to state code on that. The third amendment actually contains the elements of the report. You see there are 16 some points in that with some subdivisions thereof. These points will be incorporated into a form that will be developed by the department, and we hope to have that form in place and available for use beginning with the 2012-13 school year. And with that explanation, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for Bill? Any questions, discussion? Okay, is there a motion we approve on first reading? Got a motion to approve? Got Lonnie, motion to approve, second? Got a second, okay. Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
We'll move to, thank you, Bill, appreciate it. Item E, charter school funding enrollment rules. And Rich,
Good morning.
welcome back.
Good morning.
Rich
Glad
is
to be here.
your new father, brand new baby on here. You didn't bring pictures this morning?
I've got some if you want to project them. So this rule is just basically making some amendments to the rule because of legislation passed this spring. The two main things are adding in a paragraph that requires local districts to prepay the local share of the BEP that's generated. That had been the practice in at least a couple of the districts with charter schools, but the law made that mandatory, that they prepay what they expect to receive, and then they can make adjustments when they actually receive those local revenues. The other change was to eliminate the sample enrollment chart because the enrollment limitations, some of the enrollment limitations for charter schools were removed this spring. We also added a couple sentences in there, one clarifying that the transportation money that flows through is from the state and local BEP transportation component, and a date by which the charter schools need to provide their projected enrollment for the districts and for the state to budget what their enrollment will be for BEP allocations.
Okay. Any questions for Rich? Yeah, I guess it seems, in reading through this, it just seems like it makes sense in terms of getting in place the how the funds flow and
Right.
so forth. I don't see anything particularly unusual about it. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Is there a motion that we approve on first reading? Got a motion? Okay. Got a second? Okay. We've got the motions in place. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Rich, thank you. We'll now move to the action items on final reading. The first is the pre-service teacher performance assessment. And David, you got that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair and members. At the last board meeting, you heard a presentation from Marcy Singer-Gabella and Candy Hill Clark regarding teacher performance assessment, and it was rather in-depth, but I think you know an awful lot about it at this point. In other terms, instead of a paper and pencil exam, which we currently require to gauge how well our teacher candidates are doing on the in addressing the professional licensure standards, this is an actual performance assessment of videotaped lessons that are scored by a third party, research-based, vetted through the Stanford performance assessment. There are several performance assessment models out there. This one happens to be the one developed by Stanford. I've had the opportunity to look at this in a lot of depth over the last couple years, and I think this is a really strong move. This allows this to substitute for the Principles of Learning and Teaching test. Initially, it was for a one-year pilot. We heard back from our schools of education and teacher training programs that probably 1 year is not sufficient because many of the candidates who are either in a field placement right now or will be in the spring have already taken that Principles of Learning and Teaching test and therefore are not going to be able to go through this performance assessment. In other words, the programs ask them to go ahead and pass those tests in order to make sure they're ready to be placed into the field placement. So we want to stretch that out to another year. So instead of it saying 2010-2011, we added 2011-2012 to the language, and we think that'll give us a critical mass of pre-service candidates to make a really strong decision on whether or not this needs to be a permanent thing or if we need to look in other directions.
Okay. Questions for David? Now, David, the only thing that's being added is basically the note that's at the end of the procedure, right?
That is
Awesome.
correct.
And as David said, I think this is important because it gets away from a pencil and paper test into actually a performance assessment, which I think certainly is a desirable way to move. Any questions?
I just had one question. I totally agree. I think it's absolutely moving in the right direction. But I just wanted to clarify that it doesn't remove any requirement for any licensure exams that are already required or mandated, correct?
It would only supplant the principles of learning and teaching test.
Right.
It would not get in the. It would not take off the table any content knowledge examinations.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's great.
Right. Okay. Is there a motion that we approve on final reading? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, Morgan, textbooks. Did you bring all of them with you so we can carefully look at each one?
I don't have a trailer truck here with me. Good morning. You have before you on the website the list of textbooks as recommended by the State Textbook Commission. Approximately 417 titles were bid for this section, which includes fine arts, music, art, PE, art, driver's ed, literature, a lot of the CTE courses, and the books have been reviewed by a cadre of teachers. The teachers have listened to publishers' response to their reviews. The Textbook Commission listened to public input from different public agencies through our 10 collection sites, and they have approved the list, and we submit this list for your approval.
Okay, any questions for Morgan? Mike?
Morgan, how many of these are available for schools that want to just load them digitally?
Just about all the textbooks come with another edition called an e-book that they can use, and a lot of them also have online components. So if a school system wants to choose the online version, they can purchase that. And a lot of them are given the online version along with the purchase of a print version.
Is there a economic advantage to a district that wants to go to online or e-version as opposed to buying hard published copies?
Yes and no. They can use the e-book if they have the infrastructure to support it.
Right.
See, that's an additional cost there. Or they can use the print book. We have a few systems who are looking at or who have also already purchased online editions.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. We obviously depend on the textbook folks to do a good job of reviewing this and bringing recommendations to us. Is there a motion that we approve the recommendations of the Textbook Commission? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Please? Okay, so got a second. Okay, any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you.
Okay, English as a second language policy. Final reading, staff ratio change on that. Paula, you could.
I'm standing in for Jan Lanier today. She's in D.C. She's the ESL coordinator, but I also am a member of the ESL task force that put this proposal together. And really what it does is just clarify several smaller items and then also reduce the pupil-teacher ratio. It's been the intention of the task force all along to have that teacher-student ratio be more in line with the funding, and we're just doing this incrementally so that it won't be a burden on the districts.
So essentially the only real change here is the 45 to 40 ratio,
yes.
right?
Yes.
That's the change that's being made.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Questions for Paula? Any questions? Is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. David, distant learning, e-learning, policy.
Again, this is policy rather than rule, and you had the opportunity to hear from the commissioner yesterday in his strategic plan. had some language in his plan regarding policy that helps unleash innovation, and I think this is along those lines. I would say that when we initially drafted the policy on and distance learning at the State Board, there was a belief that the vast majority of the work was going to be done by third-party vendors, and that small school districts would struggle in being able to vet that content and make sure it was appropriate, and that the state would have a more robust role in that. That's just not really how it's worked out. School systems seem to want to have that flexibility to do the things that they think are best for their students, and we think the state's role should be just to make sure that they align with the State Board standards and the course content is appropriate, and that they're held to the same accountability measures. Therefore, we've made some minor changes, especially around training of teachers, to make sure that that LEAs understand that it's the LEA's responsibility that if they're going to offer a course via the internet, distance or e-learning virtually, that they ensure that everyone has what they need before they get moving, rather than that being a state responsibility.
Okay. Questions for David? Distance learning. Any questions, comments? Okay, is there a motion that we approve on final? Thank you. Second? Got a second. Okay. Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, David. Now move to Tennessee Learning Center Leadership Policy. Gary.
You first approved the Tennessee Learning Center Leadership Policy in 2008, which caused the in-state universities that have preparation programs to cease and desist and cancel their existing programs and reinvent their preparation programs around these new standards and new requirements. Later, as part of our Race to the Top initiative, you amended the policy to allow for non-IHE but education-ready organizations such as New Leaders for New Schools to also apply and become approved as a provider. Following that, we recognized that we had a lot of out-of-state institutions who were recruiting Tennessee applicants into their programs that had not reinvented their programs around these new standards and were producing candidates that were similar to the candidates we had been receiving in the past. So you acted and closed that window. You canceled the reciprocal agreements with all other states, but allowed states to apply to Tennessee, to the State Board, to be approved once they have completed a process similar to Tennessee's process. Alabama and Louisiana have now completed that process, and as soon as we finish and complete our process with our initial on-site visits, we will form a relationship with Alabama and Louisiana and other states as they come on board. So this action comes forward because we have now some local LEAs, some LEAs that want to form partnerships with out-of-state institutions to provide the training around and that will meet the requirements in this policy. So this opens the door for an LEA to partner with an out-of-state institution of higher education and design a program that complies with the Tennessee Learning Center Leadership Policy, apply to the state. It will go through the same vetting process and approval process as an in-state institution of higher education would go through. I think this is a good move, and this kind of finishes the triangle until we form those reciprocal agreements with the other states.
Okay. Questions for Gary? You know, I think this is an extremely good program. I think, again, it's an area that Tennessee is leading the way in the preparation of principals here, and I think we can be real proud of what we're putting in place here. And this certainly is, I think, a reasonable change to make. Any questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve on final reading? So moved. Got a motion? Second? Second. Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried.
Mr. Chairman, one additional comment, and just as an anecdote to this, we're working very closely with THAC and with the Governor's Office and with the Department of Education and are planning those on-site visits as programs have concluded and have finished their first cohort of graduates. And I think through those on-site visits, we'll start to see the quality and the fidelity of implementation of the plan, and we can assure that we're having the implementation that we want.
Good. Well, appreciate everybody's work, Gary, yours, and others that have worked on this. I think it's a very valuable program. Okay, health science teacher licensure rule. Lynn?
Good morning.
Good morning.
This item aligns the language related to the health science teacher licensure guidelines that the board approved as part of policy in the July 2010. It aligns the rules, regulations, and minimum standards language with the board policy that was passed in July 2010.
Okay, questions for Lynn? Any questions? Lynn, the way I read this, somebody that, let's say, is a nurse or physical therapy person can be hired by a school system without having any education courses or any, is that?
Where the issue, what the issue sometimes, that they sometimes found is the way that the policy and the guidelines were previously written. You might have a unit secretary or a librarian in a medical facility who might apply to teach a class in which they wouldn't have the sufficient medical knowledge and clinical skills in order to teach that class. So the guidelines were to ensure that the teachers will have that medical knowledge and clinical skills.
Okay. Any questions for Lynn? Is there a motion that we approve on final reading? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Got a second? Okay, that recalls, this is a rule, it requires a roll call vote, so Phyllis, if you could call roll, please. Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. The rule is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate it. Okay, teacher and principal evaluation policy. Commissioner, you going to address that, or
no,
Sarah? Sarah's here. Okay, you weren't here yesterday, so and you avoided all the activity yesterday.
Well, I was just engaged in some other activity, actually. But I was sorry to miss your discussion on this item particularly, though I know you were in good hands and had a good discussion from what I hear. As you said, the Commissioner presented on this item yesterday, and as you know, it's in response to feedback that we've been hearing from the field, even in the early stages of implementation. And so wanted to bring to your attention just two small changes to the policy around teacher and principal evaluation. The first of which I think is pretty self-explanatory around publication of the anticipated range of distribution of scores. Of course, that's subject to differences in school and district student achievement scores. But that would allow us to have the chance to monitor and train places that seem to be out of line with what we would expect in terms of the range of distribution. It would also mean that folks that were out of that acceptable range might not be approved for alternate models. The second is a little bit more, it requires a little bit more clarification, and we're working on communications from the department to make sure that principals and directors understand this second change. But essentially, again, we've heard from directors and principals and teachers that the number of observations in many cases is causing folks to have real challenges around time management. And so what this would do is not change the number of required observations so much as allow several of the discrete observation activities to be conducted in one classroom observation. So specifically, that would mean that a principal could observe the instruction domain in conjunction with either the planning or environment. So conduct two observations in one classroom visit. And that would streamline both the number of classroom visits, but also the number of pre- and post-conferences associated with those observations. So again, we want to make sure that we're clear in communication about this change, but also feel like it's important to respond to what we're hearing from the field around this issue of time related to the new observations. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know you had a good discussion about this yesterday, but if there are any lingering questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Okay, questions concerning the two modifications that are being made here? Any questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve? Okay, we got a motion, second. Okay. Any questions? I think this is important, Sarah. I think we're, listening to, and, as we approved these models, we certainly recognized that we weren't going to be perfect with the first thing out of the, and I think it's important that we make these changes, but I think it's also important that we continue to assess, what's happening out there and what kind of results are we getting, and work toward improving these models as appropriate. So I think it's terribly important that we listen and see if there aren't changes that can be made. The feedback that I get, I think everybody's supportive of the need for the evaluation. Is just getting the process perfected so that it works the way we'd like for it to work.
Absolutely. And you can expect many more reports and updates on just what we're hearing from the field to this nature. So certainly we'll be back in front of you at your next meetings.
Great. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, all in favor of these two items, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. TCAP achievement levels, standard setting process. David? Zach. Okay, good. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Zach Rossley. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Assessment, Evaluation, and Research, and I'm presenting on the Department's recommendation for achievement level cut scores for the Algebra 2 secondary end of course assessment. The Algebra 2 assessment is one of two assessments within our secondary portfolio that we refer to as an anchor assessment, and by that I mean the results from the assessment will be used to make college placement decisions. The assessment was given statewide for the first time this past academic year, 2010-2011. The results, once they were compiled, were presented to a team of educators this past June, which included representatives from higher education. That team recommended a set of scores, and the process and methodology used by that team was reviewed by a technical advisory committee and deemed appropriate. The department made the decision to conduct one additional study comparing those scores and our scale in general that had been established for Algebra 2 to ACT math results once we had them. Given the fact that, as I said earlier, the assessment is going to be used for college placement decisions, we felt that it was important to compare the results to how we had performed as a state on ACT math this past year. As a result of that study, the decision was made to up the proficiency cut by a few scale points. We vetted that decision with representatives from higher education, from THEC specifically. THEC did advise us that we should certainly continue to communicate around this and other issues related to this assessment with governing boards of other higher education organizations in the state, and we certainly plan to do so. But these are the scores that we recommend, and I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone has around them.
Okay, questions for Zach, Mike?
Zach, can you explain to me what the cut scores specifically are being recommended? Am I reading this that 39 is the cut score for proficient?
Yes, sir. So what you see there, I believe you see the 36 and 39. So the cuts are slightly different in the fall and spring, and that's just based on really the smaller number of students means the larger standard deviation. So the cut just looks a slight bit different, but it's in the same range, yes, sir. So the cuts that you see in that chart are literally the minimum cut points for the 4 achievement levels below basic, proficient, and advanced. So you see the scale score, you see the raw scores, and then the percentages based on how students performed this past academic year.
Mr. Chairman, sometime I would like to get a tutorial on how what these mean, because I don't want, to me, they mean something different than what I'm sure they are, so I need to be walked through this if possible.
There are, and I think a very legitimate request, and probably other members of the board would appreciate the same thing. And some of us have been through it from time to time, but the half-life on the understanding of what it really means is shorter than I'd like for it to be.
Well, let's schedule that for the January workshop.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, Mike. We really need to do that. What the alignment here of these cut scores is with what level of ACT math?
So we looked at the cut that ACT has determined demonstrates college readiness, and specifically the score is on the scale is a 22.
Yeah. So we're fairly confident that these cut scores align with 22 on ACT.
Yes, sir. Last school year, approximately 25% of students achieved college readiness on ACT math, and approximately with these cut scores, 30% of students would be considered proficient or advanced.
Great.
So we were comfortable with that.
Great. And certainly appreciate the willingness of the department to go back and take another look at this and get that alignment, because I think that alignment is very critical. So
yes, sir.
Appreciate doing that. Teresa?
I just have one question. Yeah, I think you've done a great job on this, and I think you've assembled a strong technical advisory committee. I know that one thing that Chris Domolowski, I think, recommended in the report was external validation, and I know that was very helpful to us as a board around standard setting. Do you plan to do that in the future?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve the new cut scores? Got a motion? Second? Second, Lonnie? Okay, any question, further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. High school transition policy. David.
Thank you, Chair and members. At the last meeting, you did a lot of good things, but one of the good things you did was clarify the end-of-course assessment.
Just to make it clear, we did lots of
That's right. I led with that. Clarify the end-of-course assessment requirements for those students who were enrolled dually, taking a dual enrollment course, and relieve those students from that burden, because the curriculum that they are studying, while it's over and above that which would be occurring in the high school, is not aligned to the high school policy, so it seems inappropriate to ask them to take an exam over curriculum that they necessarily have not been exposed to. The same is true for the advanced placement, IB, Cambridge, and other programs of similar ilk. And we don't enumerate those in the policy per se. We didn't want to get in the habit of listing particular programs, because it just becomes a laundry list, and we're back up here every time something good comes down the pike of saying, oh, here's another one we need to add to, and that's just so we just phrased it in that unless the course is specifically tied to the Tennessee curriculum standards for that course, that students shall be relieved from sitting for that end-of-course exam. This seems to make a lot of sense. Even though you would think that a student who's in AP U.S. History, instead of maybe honors U.S. History in a class, would do well on the end-of-course exam. That may be true, but given the nature of value-added assessment, they may not score as high as one would predict, and could actually deflate a teacher's or school score in this case. I don't know that a teacher would actually claim that student, but it would be factored into the average score of the school along that line. So we don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize or taint the process, and we would recommend this move forward in the same way we did with dual enrollment and dual credit classes.
Okay, questions? David has assured me that doing this is not going to encourage people to sign up for these courses just to miss the end-of-course test. So,
yeah, I would think that would be actually, if we could get more kids in AP classes, that's a favorable byproduct. Yes.
Okay, questions for David? All right, is there a motion to approve this on final reading? Got a motion. Second? Got a second. Okay, any discussion, questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, David. Charter school appeal policy. Danielle.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
You have before you the charter school appeals policy, which is a small change pretty much in response to public chapter number 466 that required the state board to provide written objective reasons for a decision to remand a charter school appeal back to the local level. And this is something that the state board is already doing. We just wanted to make sure that it was consistent with our policy.
Great. Okay. Any questions? Is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, we'll now move to the teacher revocation appeal item. Bill Wilson. Bill is going to carefully explain to us in 15 minutes or less what we've got in our book here that covers several hundred pages.
So I will, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Thank you. This is a matter of Lucille Richardson. Ms. Richardson, by way of background, was employed by the Memphis City Schools, and during January of 2004, she was involved in an incident with an autistic student where she removed her shoe and struck the student in the forehead, creating injury. She was thereafter indicated as a perpetrator of child abuse by the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. Her license to teach in this state was revoked in September of 2008. She petitioned for restoration of that license in August of this year. That petition was also denied, continuing based upon the fact that she remains a perpetrator of child abuse by the Department of Children's Services, and therefore would be prohibited by state statute from being hired by any school system in this state. That particular order was appealed to you. Your options today are to adopt that order, remand for further proceedings, or enter a modified order of your own. I believe your staff has recommended adoption of the order that was entered by the ALJ in her most recent appeal.
Okay, questions for Bill? Now, I think that as we observe in reading through all the material, complicated situation, you certainly have sympathy for the person involved here. But I think as long as the order is in place from the Department of Children's Services, I don't think we have really a whole lot of option in this matter. Is there a motion that we approve the recommendation from the staff that we adopt the order? Got a motion? Is there a second? Got a second? Any questions?
Can somebody ever get off the list of being a child perpetrator? I mean, is there a way to get off that list?
There is a mechanism through the Department of Children's Services where a person can petition to have their name removed. I don't know the success rate of those, but there is a due process mechanism whereby that can be done.
And I think that is the remedy in her case. If she were to pursue that and that were to happen, then I think the state board has got reasonable consideration then. Okay, any other questions for Bill? Okay, this requires a roll call vote. Phyllis? Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. The motion is carried. Bill, thank you. We'll now move to the teacher license actions. Danielle?
Yes, you have before you in your packet a list of individuals that the state board is recommending to either suspend or revoke. I guess I'll ask for any questions at this time on any of the individual recommendations.
Any questions on any of the individual actions that are proposed? I think we, yesterday in the workshop, kind of reviewed the structure that we use to bring these actions forward, to make the recommendations. I think it was a good review, and I think we've improved that structure. And it is something that we take very seriously, and staff looks at very carefully to ensure that the actions that are recommended are consistent with previous actions and are appropriate given the situations that exist. Is there a motion that we approve the recommendations for teacher license actions? Got a motion. Is there a second? Got a second? Any questions or discussion?
I will mention that these are consistent with what we discussed yesterday.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, it requires a roll call vote. Phyllis? Aye. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Let me remind you that we have meeting dates set for 2012. They're on the agenda, but will be January the 27th, April the 20th, July the 27th, and October the 19th. So we will continue our practice probably of having a workshop the day before those meetings, but those will be the meeting dates for 2012. Commissioner, any concluding comments that you have? Or
just want to thank the board again for all of the attention to detail and all the time that you all put in yesterday and today, and just appreciate the board's willingness to ask questions and make sure that you have clarity in making wise decisions. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Gary, anything?
I think the work that we're doing is real quality work. The actions that we'll consider in the next year and the next 2 years will be, I think, very guiding for the country. So I commend the board for stepping forward and being a leader.
And one final thing, we spent a considerable amount of time, Commissioner, reviewing the strategic plan that's being put in place for K-12 education. I think the board is very supportive of that strategic plan, and will be working on a master plan that will align completely and closely with the strategic plan that we looked at yesterday. So our compliments on putting that together. I think it's the right direction and some exciting things there, and we're headed for good things in K-12 education, Tennessee. Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks
Good.
again, Fielding.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I think that, the teacher evaluation